trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
This House is in session.
Announcements by Your Honor. Messages from Her Excellency the President. Petitions. Papers.
Mr. Speaker,
Honourable Attorney General.
I'm commanded to lay the loan agreement between the Government of Barbados and Corporación Andina de Fomento.
Government notices. Private members notices. Notices of questions. Report from select committees. First reading of bills. Statements by ministers. Congratulatory and/or victory speeches. Personal explanations. Motions for leave of absence. Or replies to questions. Notice of motions for the adjournment of the House on matters of urgent public importance. Orders of the day.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move the suspension of Standing Orders 6, 16, 18, 20, 42, 5, 43, and 44 for the remainder of the day's sitting.
The question is that the aforementioned standing orders be suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. The aforementioned standing orders are hereby suspended for the remainder of the day's sitting.
Order 9, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister for Maritime Affairs and Blue Economy, I'm sorry, sir. In the name of the Honourable Minister for Finance. To move the second reading of the Fair Credit Reporting Bill 2021.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. For a moment, I thought I was coming to this debate in a different capacity. But, Mr. Speaker, I think this morning, as I introduce this bill, I want to take the opportunity to thank the staff, certainly of the Chief Parliamentary Counsel's office, as well as the staff at the Central Bank, for engaging in a range of consultations and discussions with the stakeholders in relation to bringing this matter to conclusion as part of government's effort to create an environment, sir, that allows for data and information to be used to the benefit of ordinary Barbadians, as well as to businesses specifically, given the long-standing issues that have been identified, sir, in relation to how businesses, small, medium, and large, as well as individuals, access credit in this country. And as you are aware, sir, on Friday we passed the National Vendor Bill in this in this parliament which decriminalize the activity of vending, which has been centuries old in this land. And therefore, as part of a suite of legislation, sir, that the government has brought to this chamber to enfranchise, sir, and to create an environment where ordinary persons can make an investment and hopefully, sir, with the right decision making along the way, see a credible and a sustained return on that investment, however small. We know and we acknowledge, sir, that access to credit has been a challenge for many businesses, particularly small businesses in this country. And I want to take the opportunity this morning in going through this deliberately, sir, to indicate to all and sundry that we all know, sir, from history, that in the main, sir, poor people in this country, ordinary people in this country, sir, have always been able to pay their bills, sir, on time and to resolve credit. And as things come up, sir, people may find themselves in a spot of bother from time to time. But generally speaking, sir, people honor their debts and their obligations. And it is in the honoring of those debts and obligations, sir, that the data and information collected around such allows for financial institutions, sir, to make the appropriate assessment of that regularity, sir, which all of us are aware of, such that the determination of what level of credit to extend, sir, can be made available. And I believe that once the stakeholders are sufficiently seized of these opportunities, then I believe that better financial decisions, sir, can be made, not just on the part of the financial institutions, but certainly on the part of us acting in our individual capacity, but equally, sir, as we act as part of a co-op, as part of our business structure, whatever that the nature of that business structure happens to be, in order for there to be an environment where we can accelerate growth. And so I am happy to move this bill this morning, and just to indicate that this is part of the government's commitment, sir, to reforming the systems, not just in government from a legislative perspective, but to create the environment where there's order, sir, within the context of the way that financial services are provided. And it is part of a suite of legislation, sir, that we believe all taken together will indeed create the environment, sir, where there will be growth accelerated in the country. Earlier this year, sir, you know that we passed the National Payment System bill, and equally too, sir, that was groundbreaking in the context of, for the first time, creating a framework where all of the related parties as it relates to the payment service providers acting in that capacity will, for the first time, sir, be required to all be on the same path and to bring greater openness with respect to that. And therefore, as we seek to roll out not just the technology, whether it is mobile or contactless cards, there's chip and pin cards now being rolled. I believe all of the financial institutions have now upgraded their payment cards to chip and pin. That for the first time, we will have effectively a level playing field with respect to access. And therefore, the solutions now for whether you're a vendor, whether you're a small business owner who is in a fixed place, the ability now for greater e-commerce to be rolled out, sir, that we believe that these pieces of legislation taken together and the governance surrounding the regulations of such will bring us to a stage, sir, where we are confident that with these rules in place and everyone abiding by those rules, that it will open up a lot of opportunities for persons to be able to operate seamlessly, not just in relation to providing goods and or services within Barbados, but equally, sir, truly to allow dependent on the perspective of the small business person, or the business person, let me put it that way, of the business person, They will determine, sir, whether they only want to trade and make their goods and services available only in Barbados, or whether they want to make their goods and services available to the rest of CARICOM, or, sir, whether they want to make their goods and services available to the rest of the world. And that is the environment, sir, that we are trying to create here, whereby the determination of your destiny, in a real sense, this framework allows those persons to so do. And so the Fair Credit Reporting Bill that's before the Chamber today, sir, is part of, as I said, a suite of legislation that we intend that we have, in part, we have passed, and we're in the process of dealing with from a legislative perspective, but we're also putting the solutions in place, sir, to be able to so do. Let me also remind the Chamber too, sir, that in all of this, I know that the Corporate Registry, sir, Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Office, CIPO, has also modernized their systems such that the ability to form companies, sir, certainly is much easier than it was when we came to government. And I'm saying that as the government itself, the Barbados Revenue Authority having modernized its system, sir, and the National Insurance and everybody else doing the same, that we are creating the environment now where, sir, it is as easy as possible for not just the exchange of information, but certainly with respect to allowing persons for whom the ability to determine credit access can be made available, so that with these things, there's greater certainty and clarity with respect to what is before us. Now, the reality is of all of this, sir, is that the credit adjudication process, sir, is indeed a process whereby financial institutions, particularly those, sir, and I must make the distinction that there are those financial institutions, sir, who take deposits from yourself, sir, or and members of the public, and in taking those deposits to hold in trust, they on-lend obviously to other members of the public, and therefore they have a responsibility, sir, to make sure that when they lend out our money, that they have the capacity at least to be able to ensure that our deposits are safe, because we don't want to turn up at a financial institution to hear that there's no money there. So there is a responsibility for deposit-taking institutions, certainly banks and credit unions and the like, sir, that when they are on lending, that they have a degree of certainty about the credit worthiness, sir, of the person for whom they are lending the monies, and that they make the appropriate capital provisions to ensure that we are protected. Now, of course, sir, I know that in recent times, prior to us coming to office, the last administration certainly removed the minimum deposit rate at the financial institutions. And therefore, there is a sense in the country that not enough credit is being extended, and the extent to which persons obviously are receiving a return on whatever investment that or deposits that they're making into the institutions, that there's a perceived mismatch with respect to that. And what we are trying to engender here, sir, is a framework that allows for credit to be accessed by making the various provisions of data available to the financial institutions, such that, sir, they can determine what is the credit worthiness of an individual, whether that individual, sir, is, well, a human being, whether it is a sole trader, whether it is a partnership, sir, however complicated the arrangement is, that entity, the individual, that financial institutions have the capacity, sir, to know, in a sense, what is the risk that they are extending to you on behalf of their deposit takers, so as to ensure then that they can appropriately price that risk and to make those monies available. Of course, sir, within the context of the market, there are those persons who do not, I said those persons, those entities, who do not take deposits, but equally lend and provide credit within the market. And they do so, sir, certainly at their own risk. And therefore, we must understand the nature of that. And the truth is, sir, whether that is the itinerant vendor who comes around, I know that the members of the Assyrian community, sir, are known all across Barbados for providing such credit. Or, sir, you can go down to any of the retail stores in town, and certainly, I'm not going to call any specific names, but we all know, sir, that you can go and get a fridge on hire purchase or a stove or whatever from the various retail stores, which too are extending credit to members of the public. And they do so, sir, not by taking anybody's deposits, but because of the nature in which they are conducting their business. They know that whether it is $6 a week, sir, $8 a week, whatever the nature of the payment, sir, the principle is the same. They put their capital up effectively at risk, sir, and you pay whatever you can in small installments, sir. And sometimes those installments, when you really calculate the interest rate, sir, there is a significant difference between those types of arrangements vis-a-vis those that are put out with respect to what you may refer to as the traditional financial institutions that relates to credit. But no matter where you land in the space, sir, the framework that we are seeking to undertake here is to provide for greater clarity, certainty in the collection of this data, such that we are all able to be clear about the use of our data. Now, let me, at the outset, sir, say that there's nothing in this arrangement, sir, that will cause me to know how much money you owe to anybody, sir, or for you to know how much money I owe anybody, sir, unless me or you, sir, being the data subject in question, you give permission for that information to be exchanged. I want to make that clear, sir. So the government nor anybody is not going to know anything about anybody's individual business unless you have cause to come to for us for a specific reason, in which case, sir, as you know, in the normal bankruptcy or insolvency process, if you're going through that process with creditors, then you have to come with your open book, sir, and show everybody at the table was at stake, so that in resolving any specific matter, that is the normal part for the course. So there's nothing about this specific arrangement that is going to cause anybody to know how much money anybody has lent you, sir, or me, or any individual member of the public, or any business, sir, with respect to this arrangement. And why is that important, sir? Because at the end of the day, sir, confidentiality and trust is a paramount for the system. And therefore, within the context of the bill, there are very, very clear guidelines with respect to how those matters will be treated. But I want to give at the outset the assurance to the members of the public that there is nothing in here that will disadvantage any individual member of the public in relation to the way that they honor their debts and or obligations. And so it is important at the outset to understand that the definitions are important, and I take the time, sir, just to go through a couple of them just for clarity in relation to the bill. Now, credit, sir, if you permit me, means any transaction in terms of which provides for the payment to be made at a future date, and it speaks to monies due in respect to monies lent, monies payable in relation to goods, services, real property sold, or lease, or any other financial arrangement between the data subject and a third party. I think that is obvious, sir, in that if we members of the public would recall, sir, that we launched the trust loan program as a mechanism, sir, earlier in the administration as a response to circumstances that arose, with the intention, sir, specifically, of allowing small, micro, medium sized businesses to be able to establish, sir, a credit history. And you will recall, I take this opportunity, sir, to remind the Chamber that the trust loan program, which seeks to lend up to $5,000 in the first instance and then up to $10,000 in the second instance, was established specifically to be able to give small, micro individuals, sir, an opportunity to demonstrate that they can establish a credit history such that when they require monies in excess of $20,000, $30,000, $50,000, sir, that when they go to a financial institution in the regular market space, that they will have a credit history upon which they will be able to expand their businesses, sir, and to give people an opportunity. So obviously, sir, within that context, or if you go to purchase a motor car or any element of credit, sir, that someone has advanced monies to you, and which you're going to be repaying over. I think that is clear. Now, in the context of the credit bureau, sir, it simply means a person licensed under Section 6 to prepare, produce, and produce credit reports, credit scores, credit references, and other value-added products. Now, what does this mean, sir? That whatever entity is licensed to be able to provide this specific service will access data that is provided to it from the financial sector to be able to track over a period of time, sir, how persons are performing. And why is this important? Because right now, sir, potentially, right now, I can go down Broad Street right now, sir, and go into all 5 banks and apply for a credit card. And in theory, none of them knows that I have left one at 9 o'clock and gone to the other at 10, the other at 11, 12, and get that and be granted a credit card. Equally, I can go to any of the other lending agencies, sir, apply online for a credit card. I can potentially go to any of the Part 3 companies, sir, and apply, sir, for a similar line of credit. And in theory, sir, none of those entities would be aware that I, Ryan Strong, applying all over the place for these credit cards. Now, why is this important, sir? Why is this important? I know that in the circumstances, certainly as it stands right now, because of COVID, and strictly because of COVID, sir, that the circumstances around which persons find themselves financially would cause persons to seek out credit. In the same way, sir, that the government, having faced $600 million reduction in revenue, had to access concessional financing, sir, in order to maintain the quality and the provision of public services that we've been able to do over the last 18 to 21 months. Because without that financing to bridge the gap, sir, the quantum of any adjustment that would have to have been made, on the one hand, to reflect the $600 million reduction, and I'm not even talking yet about the fact that we had to increase expenditure on the other side. But the point is, the quantum of that adjustment, sir, would have been significant. So the point I'm making that as an individual, in theory, I can go to every financial institution in Barbados as it stands right now, apply for a credit card or a loan or some kind of line of credit, sir. And none of them will know, sir, that I am doing all of this. And what we are trying to establish, sir, here is a framework that allows for, one, there to be a measure of control, if you like, to be able to identify for persons who may be at risk. For these financial institutions, whoever chooses to engage and do the assessment, to say, well, look, Skipper, we see that you're all over the place here trying to get all of this access to credit. Why don't you, we can see your pattern of payments. You can see your income level, all of these things, sir. Why don't you come and refinance on these terms rather than be all over the place trying to service all of these things? And the reality is, sir, that we know, whether in our families, sir, we know whether in our community, sir, we know within our profession, sir, we all know people, sir, who because of, not just of circumstances as it relates to COVID, but certainly circumstances, generally speaking, who can benefit from that type of progressive intervention that this type of system would allow financial institutions to so do. Because once financial institutions are aware, sir, as to what is the extent to which you require credit, then the appropriate intervention, sir, can be made such that it actually can redound to the benefit of the individual. So the intent, sir, the intent is ultimately to be in a position for a financial institution to be able to assist if the applicant or the data subject, in this case, sir, is sufficiently aware and educated as the options that they may have available to them, such that they don't make decisions that may be detrimental to their financial health, sir, and that we are disciplined enough to be able to execute. So the process by which credit bureaus and credit scoring and these types of fancy things are done really, sir, are intended ultimately, particularly for those persons who may find themselves stretched, gives an opportunity for them to be able to come to a financial institution if they so desire, sir. Because at the end of the day, sir, if I run strong or not, if I'm not desirous of seeking the intervention, then there's nothing that a financial institution can do to assist me. I have to be man enough to accept that I might have extended myself and that I now need a framework, just like, sir, just like how the Burke Plan was devised to respond to the national circumstance, that at an individual level, sir, at an individual level, that we can come to in arrangement, the type of arrangements with financial institutions that this framework can deliver if persons, sir, are desirous of being able to seek such an intervention. And I raise that because I know that we are not supposed to speak to prospective legislation, but I only make this point, sir, in the context of, I know that bankruptcy and insolvency, the framework for that is being reviewed, and that all of these are things that fit in, sir, as part of the puzzle for ensuring that whether you're an individual or whether you are a business or of any type, that you have the capacity, sir, to avail yourself of the frameworks that we're setting up for resolution. And this is absolutely, absolutely important, sir, in the context of being able to drive business, because the sooner that we can get things resolved, sir, where there's openness of information, because I would rather, sir, that people are in a position to come early, and I say come early meaning within the framework of the financial system, sit down with their creditors, whether as individuals, sir, or as businesses, come to an arrangement that allows for everybody to go forward. You know, the fancy word, sir, is going concern, but allows the activity to continue in a way that keeps everybody as whole as possible, such that there's resolution to the process. So these are critical parts of the puzzle, sir, that we are putting in place to facilitate the conduct of business, but by the same token, to ensure then that the right type of credit, sir, is extended to people when it's required. I speak to the credit information provider, sir, means a person specified in Section 16 that gives credit information on a data subject to a data bureau. Of course, sir, as I mentioned, traditionally, people think of banks and credit unions as those entities that provide credit. But the reality is, sir, that the landscape of the provision of credit has changed since I was a little boy. and there's been so much innovation within this space, in the last 30 years, sir, that we now find ourselves in a situation where we have those established, and as I made reference to them earlier, sir, those who are established as banks and credit unions taking deposits and lending, but then you have a set of entities that do not take anybody's deposits, but they provide lending to both individuals and businesses in such a way that we now have to ensure then that to the extent that persons are exposed, that we can find a mechanism to allow for there to be some order. And the truth is, sir, in recent times, there has been the evolution of such things as payday loans and these types of things, sir, that a number of our constituents and members of the public avail themselves of, which, as I said, sir, it is part of the landscape right now. And I say to everybody, sir, who wishes to hear, that this process and this system is designed to be able to unlock access for credit that is priced at the appropriate level, contingent on your risk. Now, sir, as you and I both know, I like to think that I am I'm reasonably literate from a financial perspective. But the reality is, as an individual, I will make decisions based on what I perceive to be a good risk or not. And as I would like to say, sir, as big men and women, we make those decisions every day for various reasons. And I know that this process of financial literacy is not a sexy topic. A lot of people don't understand to some degree, sir, some of the decisions, the ramifications, the long-term ramifications of the decisions that have been taken. And therefore, what I'm suggesting is that and I've spoken to the governor of the central bank. I know that the member for St. James Central has started the financial literacy program under that ministry. But beyond that, we really do need, as a country now, sir, to do a full court press with respect to the public awareness, but not just the public awareness, sir, but the actual exercise of the decision making. Now, I go back and I say, sir, that nobody can tell me whether to apply to Bank A, Bank B, C, D, a credit union, or anything. But I must be sufficiently comfortable to know that if I'm going to access credit, that I have the wherewithal to repay, and that if I find myself in trouble, that there's a process where I go to all of these institutions and say, oh, look, hey, I need to make an adjustment. And that there's nothing wrong with making an adjustment, sir, because at the end of the day, it's what the accountants call restructuring in these fancy words. So I say to ordinary Barbadians that we have to recognize that as we go forward, certainly in the New Republic, sir, that even if a business entity may not be successful or as successful as we would like it to be, that it cannot be the be-all and end-all with respect to our hopes and dreams. And therefore, in solving this access to credit problem, I think there's a mental shift, sir, that we must all make along this journey with respect to, one, how we treat people whose enterprises may or may not be successful in the way that we might believe it should have been, and not to hold on to these things as if there's something to do with one's character. At the end of the day, sir, the pursuit of legitimate enterprise and business is something that this government fully supports, and therefore we are constructing a framework that allows for persons to be able to access the appropriate credit so long as they are prepared, sir, to make the adjustments within the context of their operations and their lifestyle, so to speak, to ensure that they can do. I want to, however, indicate as in clause 2, with respect to adverse action, I just want to make very, very quick reference to that definition. Because sometimes, sir, I will go to a bank, the bank says, well, your application is denied. Because they have done their internal due diligence and they may have assessed that either I don't have the capacity to repay because the venture that I am undertaking is perhaps a little too rich for them to think, or if they lend me the money, the interest rate is such that it makes it unaffordable for me to be able to service. So I speak to adverse action in the context of that, because the reason why we establish, and I go back to the establishment of the trust loan program, sir, is to get that credit history under our belt, sir. Under our belts, so that we can show to financial institutions that we can handle credit, that we have been able to honor the commitments that we have committed to, such that it reduces the potential for adverse action. Now, adverse action, sir, means a decision that taken by a credit information provider based on a data subject's information from the credit bureau that adversely affects a data subject, including the refusal of an application for credit, an increase in interest rate on the loan or other credit facility, a decrease in the credit limit or the revolving credit facility, the cancellation, freezing, or suspension of a loan or other credit agreement, the refusal of business, an unfavorable change in terms in the coverage and the amount of credit on an insurance existing or applied for in conjunction with underwriting credit or insurance, or in part of the data subject or the request of the guarantor or collateral, or any other action that adversely affects a transaction between the data subject and the credit provider. The truth is, sir, all of these things happen every day in Barbados right now. And so if you sir, are going to take out a life insurance policy, the insurance company will ask you to go and do what is referred to as underwriting. And they will give you a premium provisionally on the basis that, you don't have any NCDs or what have you. When you go to get the checkup, so let's say for you, sir, that your premium is $2 a month. But then, sir, because of, I'm not saying you, sir, but I know you don't eat sauce, but the sauce and the fried pork and stuff that you eat on the Saturday, sir, that when you go to get your checkup, you got hypertension, you got diabetes, you might have a little heart condition, all of that. Then all of a sudden, they rate you. And therefore, they rate you on the basis of your health and the probability that you're going to die sooner rather than later. And therefore, they come back and say, well, Mr. Speaker, your premium is now $200 a month as opposed to the $2 for a healthy person. And I don't know if you smoke, sir, but if you smoke and everything else in there, all of that is part of the mix. So therefore, the what may be referred as an adverse action in the context here is based on the lifestyle or the circumstance of the person. As I said to you earlier, sir, I could go down Broad Street, apply for 5 different credit cards, and I might get a gold card, I might even get a disc card, I might even apply to the same institution for other credit cards. And the reality is, based on my record, my history of payment, the banks might say, you know what, your credit limit too high, we can see you got a little issue there, we can lower this here just to make sure that you don't extend yourself for the most part. Of course, they can also refuse based on the information that's provided, because as you and I both know, sir, we would like to believe that the banks are having taken our deposits, that the banks and credit unions are operating in a manner that allows them to determine whether or not they're going to get back our deposits in a timely manner to allow for us to be comfortable, within the context of the services that they're providing to the general public. So these are things, sir, that occur every day, and the extent to which people's ability to minimize that is all dependent on the behavioral pattern, sir, with respect to what our payment history happens to be, and therefore it is something that we must appreciate. That, as I said at the very outset, I know, sir, as a person growing up in this country, that people have a very strong commitment, sir, to paying the bills. There are a few people around, sir, who may not share that strong perspective, but I know most Barbadians do. And because most Barbadians do, this type of system allows for us to be able to look at that and to allow persons then the ability to be able to have greater access to credit, which would allow for more opportunities, more enterprises to be expanded. And I say to the young people, I'm looking at the member for St. George's South who brought the trust loan program to life. I say to the young people, the trust loan program it is only $5,000 in the first instance to borrow up to. Use the trust loan program as that stepping stone to demonstrate, sir, that you can handle a little 5,000. Because if you can handle a little 5,000, sir, and you go to the next level and you handle the 10,000, you repay that, sir, it may seem mundane and arduous, but the reality is, once you're able to demonstrate that, sir, and do so sufficiently, you go into a financial institution with your credit history, sir, your history. And not just the financial institution, but any other potential investor. It might be a uncle, somebody from church, whoever it is that you may want to invest into your business. And because you can demonstrate, sir, that you have a credit history, it allows for the opening up of greater investment. So I don't want people to only look at this in the context of strictly the financial sector, but this is really something that is going to be transformational, sir, if ordinary citizens recognize that what we have been able to put in place is actually to their benefit. In the context of small, medium, and other size businesses, it is important as much as possible to avail yourselves of the digital technology, because it makes it easier for the said financial institutions to see the cash that is flowing through your business. And the easier you can do that, sir, the better it is for decision making from a credit perspective. And therefore, this is what is going to truly, sir, I believe, unlock access to credit, as well as the ingenuity, sir, of a number of our young people, middle-aged people who are, and the truth is, sir, there are people out there who have 15, 20 years experience, who probably a little hesitant to step out and say, like, I can do my own thing. But the truth is, sir, based on the experience that people have, these are the types of systems that I believe people can step out with confidence and say, look, I can do this. And because we are putting these systems in place, I fundamentally believe, sir, that once we can make that mental shift, the mental shift with respect to how we do business and how we are accessing credit, that it may seem menial to go to the trust loan program and ask for $5,000 when you're accustomed making a turnover as working for somebody else, sir. You know, turnover of $100,000 a month or $200,000 a month. But as an individual, you don't have that history, but you have the expertise, you have the know-how, and therefore, by using the system that we are putting in place, you can indeed, sir, be able to create successful companies of varying sizes across this landscape. And I really believe, sir, that with that mental shift, that a number of persons can truly, sir, generate some wealth for themselves and their families and build stronger communities, sir, and make the economy, sir, that much stronger going forward. The truth is, sir, that as I said, this process is not necessarily new to Barbadians in the context that we know that when we go to the banks, and sometimes the banks will ask you for all kinds of information. I want to see who else you owe. So sometimes, sir, somebody might got your house with one bank, you might got the car with the credit union, the student loan for your child probably with somebody else, sir, and as you go through a what you call a credit adjudication exercise, go and get all this information to come back to show. And sometimes, sir, some of us may guarantee a loan for somebody and forgot about it, maybe 15, 20 years that we guaranteed a loan for somebody, and then the person might find themselves in a little trouble, and you get a letter from the financial institution reminding you that, well, so-and-so in trouble, and therefore you need to think. So all of this is intended, sir, to just streamline all of that, so that as a data subject, every year, all of us every year, will be entitled to a free credit report that we, sir, can challenge. And the important thing here is for the public to understand, sir, that if there's anything in your credit report that you know not to be true, then the provisions here allow for you to challenge the persons providing that information to the credit bureau to have it changed, because it is important that we all participate, sir, in our own success, and therefore do not allow anybody to publish anything from us. Now, the truth is, sir, I know that from time to time, for example, and that's why we've been working to bring everybody along on the same railway track, because sometimes, sir, a transaction goes through, but it is not credited to your account in time, and because it's not credited in time, the bank has a standing order to deduct from your account X amount of money. But because, as I said, sir, I'm just telling you as it is, your salary might go to one bank or might go to the credit union, but your mortgage at another bank, you might have your car from one of the dealers. It might be financed through one of the dealers. And so people have this network, sir, of financial services, for lack of a better term. That is the term. They have a network of financial services that relies, sir, on the orderly execution. And if the money doesn't hit, and depending on what happens in your accounts department, piece goes here, piece goes there, piece goes there. And if there's something, if there's any disruption along any of that, then it may trigger that you had a late payment, when in truth, in fact, you did not. And therefore, we all know these things. We are working with the financial institutions, and by financial institutions, I'm referring to in their capacity as payment service providers. To help solve those problems digitally, so that if you set up a direct debit, sir, for your car to be paid at garage A, X amount of money out of your salary, for your mortgage to go to credit union B, sir, the student loan might be at bank C. I don't know what else you might have in your portfolio, sir. The land loan might be maybe at some other entity, sir. So there's that network of financial services. The payments infrastructure must resolve that, such that when you are paid, that the monies go wherever they should go, and that the appropriate data and information reflects accurately what has actually transpired. And therefore, these are the things that I say to people. Look at as a matter of fact, sir, the cabinet office sent me my pay slip, I think 2 days ago, and I look at it every month just to make sure, sir, that thing. And when I go to my bank account, I make sure it is there. I don't make no sport, sir. I don't make no sport. And I say so in all seriousness, because we have to check. In the same way, sir, that I check every month to see whether or not the money going to the BRA. I check every month to see the money going to the NAS. Why? Because if something happens, I need to be aware that something has happened and to be able to take whatever action that needs to be taken. Because in moving forward, sir, in a society that we want to be as responsive as possible, we have to actively, sir, participate in our financial success. And if we are taking up credit from persons, I think we all know that we set up our systems to pay. We either and the same goes for bill payments and a whole range of other things too. And therefore, all of this now is going to be an exercise where institutions have to upgrade their billing systems and all of these things, sir. Because at the end of the day, as the consumer, when they pay you, and I know that it seems like it's taking forever, but the movement to that real time ACH, where I can pay you from bank A, or sorry, no, it's a bank A, from institution A to institution Z, sir, and it happens instantaneously. That's where we're trying to get to, so that the finality of payment and the validation is clear. So it doesn't matter whether it is a retail store downtown, whether it's a coconut vendor, sir, in St. George, or any person in the country, or even outside the country for that matter, but any person in the country, that we can ensure that these issues with respect to payments are resolved such that the recording of the information as it relates to the extension of credit, that it is as accurate as possible, sir, so that persons don't have to be calling around at 5 or 6 different institutions to verify that they receive the money. And I know that that is work in progress, sir, but it is something that I hope we can bring to finality early in the new year in order to move forward with this. Under this regime, sir, the central bank will be the regulator with respect to this matter, as it relates to the regulations of credit bureaus and the framework that will guide it. And the reality is, sir, that this is a monumental intervention, because for too long we have been talking about access to credit. We've been talking about it for too long, sir. And this government, certainly I'm proud to be a part of, has been working to solve this problem. And at least we've done so with our policy intervention as it relates to the establishment of the Trust Loan Program. Obviously, COVID has meant that the economy has not performed in the way that we would have liked it to be able to do. But the framework is still there. And we continue to press on, sir, to deal with these substantive matters. This piece of legislation, along with work to deal with the collateral registry, which will allow the assets of people, sir, to be properly recorded and made available as part of the system, such that credit/debt, sir, credit/debt, that the servicing of it and what goes behind the collateral of it is important. And the truth is, sir, that I know that the lending policies of financial institutions are quite curious, because chances are, sir, you would easily get a loan to buy a car, which by the time you put it on the road, sir, will depreciate. But if you are interested in starting a business, the terms change. And that's a very interesting thing for me, and I still haven't, I know technically why they do it that way, but I still don't understand it, because at the end of the day, we have to change the way that we see and assess risk in the country, sir. Because as a small open economy, the determination of the level of risk that we can accept with respect to business, I think we have to review that very, very carefully, because at the end of the day, the structures and the circumstances around which businesses operate now in the 21st century certainly must change, sir. And I say to Barbadians, the days of being the chief cook, bottle washer, and all of that, sir. I mean, I know we like to do things ourselves, and it makes us feel important, sir. But the truth is, sir, we need to develop a team of people around us that reduces that risk. And I'm making this point, sir, specifically because I know that if I come to your bank, sir, and say I want to expand my business, and then you look into my business, you realize that I am what is referred to as the key man, and that unless I am there, nothing can happen, then you see me, whilst I may be presenting the world's best idea to you, if there's nothing beyond me, the individual, sir, then you see it as a risk because there's no other supporting mechanism in the context of the business, such that if something happened to me tomorrow, that the investment or the credit or whatever arrangement that you're putting in place with me, that can still continue. So I am saying to Barbadians that we have to look at the teams that we are building around our within our businesses to reduce the perception that you are the chief cook, bottle washer, and everything, sir, the key man, what the insurance companies refer to as key man. But and I accept, sir, that in every enterprise, there may be 3, 4, 5 people that are key. And the extent to which key man insurance is an option, I say to those persons that you must make those decisions, because at the end of the day, if you're going to expand your enterprise, then these are some of the very critical undertakings that when people look and assess risk, if it is only up to the performance of an individual, it will make it particularly difficult for that risk to go away or to be mitigated. And therefore, we must start to think in the context of co-ops or clusters or whatever other partnerships, whatever framework that allows us to be able to mitigate and minimize that risk, sir, such that the provision of credit to me and the Honourable Member for St. Peter and the Honourable Member for St. Lucie, that if the three of us got together and presented the same proposal, that the risk is sufficiently spread such that if something happens to me, the member for St. Peter and the member for St. Lucie can take the business forward. And that is the type of approach that will help us, sir, to be able to better unlock access to credit. As I say, sir, it is a complicated space, but I think mentally we have to be committed as individuals to be able to find those strategic partners who are similarly aligned to us with respect to our vision and have it executed. And once we can do that, then I'm satisfied, sir, that this is not just a piece of legislation to establish a credit bureau, but it is a piece of legislation that is part of a critical piece of the puzzle that allows for individuals to come together strategically to be able to advance that which they believe their vision can support. And therefore, it is important that we establish that at the outset, because it is the application now, sir, of all of this knowledge that we have accumulated over time and working together that is going to make the substantive difference, sir, to the lives of ordinary Barbadians. Now, sir, let me right, so when the bill becomes law, sir, it will permit licensed persons to engage in credit reporting activities, which include ascertaining whether a credit information provider holds information in relation to the recipient of credit, collecting, compiling, measuring, and updating data subject information, sir, developing and making credit reports, credit scores, value-added products available to subscribers and users. Carry out market and statistical research, sir, on matters relating to credit reports and assessment, compiling and maintaining databases in respect of data subject information and generating reports from such data bases. And obviously, because the central bank is the regulator, generator of any reports as required by the central bank pursuant to the Act. Now, there are two aspects, sir. Financial institutions licensed under two aspects as it relates to credit information providers. So financial institutions licensed under the Financial Institutions Act, sir, CAP. I think it is at clause 16, sir. Clause 16. CAP 324A. Insurance companies only as it relates to the provision of credit at B. And credit unions, sir, registered under cooperative societies. These are what you refer to, sir, as automatic credit information providers because, as I said, sir, these are the traditional providers of credit information with respect to the system. At clauses 16.2 and let me refer to 16.3, there are a set of entities that may be designated, sir, as credit information providers. And I just go through them quickly, sir. The central bank may, sir, in the public interest, by notice, designate any of the following as credit information providers. The Light and Power, Barbados Light and Power, the Barbados Water Authority, the Corporate Affairs Property Office established under the Corporate Affairs and Intellectual Property Act, the Land Registry established under the Land Registration Act, the Registration Officer, any person licensed under the Telecoms Act, any person carrying on business selling goods pursuant to the hire purchase agreement, conditional on hire purchase, sale, or credit sale agreement pursuant to Hire Purchase Act, Cap 328, a dealer in securities who is licensed under the Securities Act, the Student Revolving Loan Fund, sir, established under the Student Revolving Loan Fund Act, and any other entity possessing credit information not referred to in subsection 1. And so nothing here out of the ordinary, sir, with respect to what happens normally and the extent to which they are, and that's why I say, sir, that I know that as members of the public, we have, from time to time, there are always some issue either with a utility company or, I certainly have had it, sir, I've had an issue with one of my telecoms, one of the telecoms companies, because the payments were going and not reflecting on the bill, sir, and a whole set of reconciliation. I had to pause, go through them myself, and make sure that that they knew what I paid them and that it was reflected in the bill, sir. The truth is, sir, it really should not have had to come to that because their internal systems ought to be able to do that reconciliation in a timely manner. And so I know that there are times when we have to engage with these entities, and therefore as we go forward to make sure then that all of this is regularized and properly done, that any of these entities who, unlike a bank or credit union that obviously has a credit section that is designated specifically to dealing with that as we move forward, we need to make sure that these entities, once properly designated, that they have the capacity to be able to deal with members of the public in a way that obviously is timely with respect to these matters. And so those are the two types of credit information providers. And as I said, these will be determined at a later date as to which ones are there. Now, let me just indicate, sir, that as you are aware, all mortgages are required to be registered. And I do know that the Corporate Affairs is in the process of working out a path to dealing with some of the backlog with respect to registration as it relates to that. But that said, the ability of all of us to be able to have access to our credit report, and I will Section 19, sir. Section 19 says subject to section 21, a user may, with the consent of the data subject, request a credit report, credit score, or any value-added product or any other credit information with respect to the data subject from the credit bureau in accordance with the permissible purpose of the recipient. And you would realize that in this process, as we go to apply for a loan, so as I told you right now, I can go to all the banks in town, all the credit unions that they have, even though I may not be a member, but I should be a member, but in theory, I could be a member of all. But I can go to all of them, and what will change is that they will ask for my permission, obviously, to look and see where else I've gone. And therefore, which is within their right to do, because if they're going to assess me properly, they need to know that I ain't hiding nothing on the application form, and that I have disclosed all of what I have things so that they can properly assess. Now, I remind the public, sir, that banks and credit unions take our deposits. And because they take our deposits, they have a fiduciary responsibility to do this when they lend, to make sure that they can lend in an environment that gives them coverage. And therefore, to the extent that they have to make sure, I think is easily understood. There are others who may not care because they are not taking anybody's deposits, but they still may want to know exactly what it is they are getting into. And therefore, the extent to which then I give permission to you, sir, to determine or get a report on me, which once I certify is accurate, you then are in a position then to decide whether you are a bank or credit union or somebody else who sits outside of that space to determine how much money you're going to extend to me. What is the duration? What is the interest rate that you're going to charge me? And therefore, it is within that context, sir, that the supply of this information is important, because as I said, it allows us to get the best option for credit available to us, appropriately priced, sir, and certainly to give the financial institutions full information set from which to work, rather than me choosing to tell you, well, I will only tell you about the good loans that I have versus the maybe not so good loans that I may have. And therefore, that's what I'm saying to members of the public, that we have to engage this process with a view of being able to sit down with financial institutions ultimately, and if there are issues across our portfolios, which there may be, depend on circumstances, that we find a way to be able to resolve them. And I genuinely believe, sir, that is possible so long as people are sufficiently confident to want to do it and understand that it is actually in their best interest long term to so do. Now, as I spoke to earlier, sir, I'm trying to find the section that speaks to the I had it marked here. The provision of an annual return. Right, section 27, sir. Section 27. Data subject's right of access and correction. So section 27(1) speaks to a data subject is entitled, sir, to be given by a credit bureau once every calendar year a copy of the data subject's credit report without cost to the data subject. So all of my loan payments, sir, all of whether it's the house, the car, the student loan, the whatever, sir, all of my data information, every year I will get a copy from the credit bureau. I will look at that copy, sir, of the thing. And that's why I told you, sir, I went back earlier and I told you that every month, sir, I just check my pay slip. I just check to make sure that things go where they're supposed to go, and verify for my own self that I have been able to do what I am supposed to do, or at least the arrangements that I put in place were actually executed. So the reason that this is important is because I don't want people to be making the decision about me on information that may or may not reflect what actually transpired. And therefore, that's why, as I said, even though from the payment service provider side, we are working to make sure that all of those issues with respect to the movements of money and the timing of it, with respect to standing orders or direct debits, however they're described, that those things are executed with sufficient time to ensure that all of this reporting and data obviously will reflect accurately what has actually transpired. And the beauty about migrating from the current system to a real-time system is that, as you know, sir, it is still peculiar, but you know banks traditionally open from 8 till 3. And even though banks, we have long passed and introduced technology beyond 8 to 3, the move to what I refer to as a real-time automated clearinghouse would mean, because when they originally set up this thing about 20 years ago, sir, even though it was technology, they still predicated it on the 8 to 3 context of a bank opening. So imagine, sir, that you are trying to pay somebody on a Saturday, but the transaction has to wait until Monday before it hits the system. Now, the truth is that don't make no sense, because you can walk into a point of sale, use your card to buy groceries on a Saturday. The money is in the system is accounted for within that, and therefore we're transforming this whole thing, Mr. Speaker, because whenever you make a payment, sir, the payment should be credited to whoever account you're crediting it to, such that whether there's a bank holiday, sir, as you know, sir, if there's a bank holiday, you know, when you have bank holidays in and it's a Monday, but the payment's still due the Monday, technically, because that's how it's programmed. Now, of course, one would have to go in and do an override to thing, because the bank is closed on a Monday, right? The transaction then is credited on a Tuesday. So too much complicated programming, too much intervention, sir, with respect to all of this, and therefore, that is what we are working towards with respect to the national payment system, in terms of ensuring that all of the payment service providers have the infrastructure in place to ensure that payments happen in real time. So there's no need to lag, you ain't getting a batch of transactions to go through, and all of that will be a thing of the past, so that it don't matter whether the bank open or not, sir. And I make reference to the banks only because the banks in our current system also function as payment service providers, and therefore we have to disentangle the operational side of the bank from that of being a payment service provider, bringing it into real time, so that a lot of these issues, sir, that we have been confronted in the past, that these will go away, and therefore put us in a position then that business can be transacted in real time. People can be certain that they receive their payments in real time, and that we are in a position then to really transform the economy. So section 2, sir, of the said clause, a credit bureau and credit information provider should, at the request of the data subject, give electronically or otherwise to the data subject a written report in the language that the data subject specifies, relating to the credit information on which the credit information of which that individual is the data subject, the purpose for which the credit information is being or is to be processed, and the recipients of or classes of recipients to whom the credit information may be disclosed. And I see it as an opportunity, sir, really as an opportunity, because right now when I think of myself, I have to go into one app to look at this, I have to go into something else to look at something else. And so I see it as an opportunity, sir, for all businesses as well as all individuals, sir, to see in one place, at least every year, in one place, all the necessary information as it relates to them. So that it gives us, for the first time, unless you have an accountant, sir, I don't know if you're fortunate enough to have an accountant to do your financials, but unless you have an accounting firm that will do that for you on an annual basis, I think for the first time this will give individuals an opportunity to see in a consolidated place, sir. Maybe the member for St. Michael West may have an accounting firm that might think, but I'm just saying, unless persons have the resources to employ someone to do that on a dedicated basis, that this will give persons the opportunity to see in one place, potentially, all of their obligations, and for them then to certify, sir, that it is indeed so. Because as I said, the purpose of this exercise is when we go to access credit, it shouldn't require, sir, you to try to dig out all your birth certificate and everything that you ever had that you have to go and give to. So, and I make this point. If I go downtown now, sir, to all 5 banks, I will have to give them 5 sets of information in order to apply for the credit. Even the process will change, sir, because by being able to extract that information, then I don't need to go through that same process in the same way in terms of giving access. So I can still go and apply to everybody, but of course everybody will know that I'm applying for credit because they will see that you're making these things. And I think it's important for us to understand that the way that we have done things in the past, sir, will of necessity change because we are able to harmonize this. And the truth is, sir, I like things to be as easy as possible. And we're trying to upgrade and do a whole lot to make things easier for people to do their business. And the reality is, in so doing, it means that even the institutions themselves have to change their internal processes to be able to provide better service to the public. But I hope that what that will mean then is that I hope, it must mean that the time within which decisions are, that credit is adjudicated, meaning decisions, sir, should be shortened. As you know right now, sir, you receive, I don't know, we all may receive offers of, as a matter of fact, the financial institutions now have gone the other way. They're offering you money now, sir, pre-approved loans that once you supply certain information, you will have access to. So things have sufficiently evolved already with some of the internal systems, and we want to bring everybody on the same platform, because at the end of the day, sir, what I believe this will allow to be done is to level the playing field with respect to the provision of information. And once that playing field is level, sir, how each institution is able to upgrade its systems to be able to respond to the market needs, I feel, sir, that this will provide that impetus that allows for greater access to credit. Clause 3, it says the data subject is entitled to submit a letter of dispute to a credit bureau regarding any inaccurate data respecting the data subject held in the credit bureau's database, and request correction of the inaccurate data by the credit bureau. So that's why I said, sir, I don't make no sport. Every month I get the thing, I check. Takes me probably about 15, 20 minutes, but I check. And I do so habitually because it's part of I think my own personal responsibility to make sure that things get paid, for which I want to make sure happens and not assume that it happened. But I accept, sir, that there are technological solutions to help us to do that, and I ask members of the public, sir, to avail themselves of such. 4, where a letter of dispute has been submitted under subsection 3, the credit bureau shall within 7 days, sir, investigate the dispute and the inaccuracy of any data and report its finding to the data subject, making any corrections as may be warranted. and inform the data subject that he may report the dispute to the Central Bank of Barbados. Okay? 5, sir, where a data subject requests from a credit bureau a credit report or other data subject information processed in respect of the data subject, the credit bureau shall, within no more than 3 business days after receipt of the request, furnish to the data subject the credit report or other information. Now, clause 7, sir, speaks, subclause 7, 27.7, and just to be clear, a credit bureau is not obligated, sir, to supply any information unless the credit bureau has A, received a request in writing, and B, receive such fee as the credit bureau may require unless otherwise prescribed. So, just to be clear, we are all entitled to annual report, sir. Free, one report free of cost every year, and we can challenge that. Anything outside of that, sir, and of course, anything outside of that, we must request in writing. So if, for example, sir, I realize that in checking, as I do routinely, something has gone awry, I can intervene at that particular point and a request that is made and do so in writing, or I can wait until my free report comes up and make the request then. But of course, if between when I observe something and when I get my credit report, people are using that information which may contain inaccurate information, then obviously if I know that that is the case and I wait until then obviously I take that upon me. And therefore it is important that we all, as I said, sir, verify that we are doing our business in the way that we know we want to do our business, and make the appropriate intervention as required. Okay? 8, sir, where a credit bureau requires further information in order to satisfy it as to the identity of the person making the request, or locate information for which that person seeks, and has informed the requesting person of the requirement for further information, the credit bureau is not obliged to comply with the request unless it is supplied with that further information. So, as you know, sir, with the this, and I take this opportunity just to indicate to Barbadians, and I think on this particular clause 27.8, particularly as it relates to identity, I take this opportunity now, sir, to say this to Barbadians. I think all of us, sir, in this chamber have been the subject of people on social media posting profiles using our profiles to say to persons that there's grants for this and there's money for that and all these types of things, sir. And the intent, sir, is to try to use the trust, I suspect, that people have with respect to government to get information from people. So they tell you to go and apply it on something, and supply your name, your telephone number, a whole set of information that people make requests on the assumption that it is just permit me, sir, that it is Ryan Strong sending a message to you, sir, on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and you, sir, seeing my photograph, supplies the information. Now, what is important to understand and to recognize, sir, is that identity theft is a very serious thing, sir, globally. And I take this opportunity as it relates to clause 27.8 here to remind the public, sir, that if you provide all of your information, and that's why it's important that the way that data is handled within institutions are paramount, and I know the Data Protection Act deals with that. But if you or I, sir, voluntarily click on some link that we see on Facebook or Instagram or WhatsApp or anything, sir, that is purporting to request information for a grant from government or whatever, and we give every bit of information, sir, that allows Aussie Moore, and I use the Aussie Moore term generically, sir, to go and apply for credit in the name of Ryan Strong, given that I collected this information, sir. And Ossie Moore, sir, is able to go to a financial institution and use the information that I, sir, Ryan Strong, supplied on some Facebook post or something, get credit in my name, sir. And then when I check the credit bureau and realize, because you know what's going to happen, sir, credit is taken out in your name, the bank or whoever then call me asking me why I ain't pay back the money. And therefore, this issue of identity theft, sir, is an important point, because how we as individuals, sir, engage with social media, and there's a whole lot of it circulating, sir, and I can't underscore how important it is that Barbadians do not, sir, supply their personal information to random people on the internet, because the consequences, sir, could be very dire. Because when it comes time for you to get your credit score from the credit bureau, and you see that $100,000 or $50,000 there that you ain't know nothing about, you never see a cent of it, sir. You don't even know how things. You then start to figure out, well, how did this happen? And then the process then of trying to figure out, well, who actually got the money? Because having supplied the information, the criminals, sir, are very, very clever. They're very clever. And I can only urge Barbadians, sir, that when it comes to identity, that if, in this case, this is identity in relation to requesting from the credit bureau. But I want to turn it around, sir, and make sure that Barbadians understand that if you click on some link and give out all your information, and then the person promises you that you're going to get the $50,000 if you send them the bank account details in it, sir, and you provide your bank account details because you pay some small admin fee, and they ask you for the bank account details, and you provide that. The person has the capacity now, sir, to go away and use your identity to be able to access credit in your name, for which then you become liable for, unless, of course, there's some extensive investigation that then takes however long, sir, because sometimes the persons aren't even here, that you're able then to have it done. So you want to avoid that nightmare altogether, sir, and therefore you're protecting your identity as part of this this process is going to be particularly important. And so I made that reference here not because of what is spelled out here explicitly with respect to the credit bureau, but just understand that the credit bureau must know that it is you, the individual, who is making the request, and to make sure then that the changes that are required to be requested, that they can verify that it is indeed you. Okay? A data subject at 9, sir, is entitled by notice in writing to require a credit bureau within such period as is reasonable in the circumstances of the case to cease processing for a specified purpose or in a specified manner, or not to commence processing any credit information related to the data subject for the reasons specified in subsection 10. And the reasons that referred to in subsection 10 is that the data is inaccurate or misleading, the processing of the data or the processing for that purpose or in that manner is causing or likely to cause substantial damage or substantial distress to him or to another, and that the damage or distress is or would be unwarranted. And it says, goes on to say, sir, the credit bureau shall within 21 days of receiving the notice, hereinafter refer to this data subject notice, give the data subject a written response, A, stating that it has complied or intends to comply with the data subject notice, or B, stating its reasons for regarding the data subject notice as being unjustified and the extent, if any, to which it has compiled or intends to comply with the data subject notice. And 12, where the central bank is satisfied on the application of the data subject that the data subject notice, which appears to be justified, has not been complied with, the central bank may order the credit bureau to take such steps as the central bank deem appropriate to comply with the data subject notice. And these are important provisions, sir, because as I said earlier, we have to be active in this process, and the level to which we are active in this process will help the system to be accountable, make sure that the data obviously is and obviously there's responsibility for the credit information providers, and as I mentioned some of the operational issues that may be resolved, which can be resolved within the context of the information that the credit information provider may give to a credit bureau. So those operational issues aside, obviously if there are other issues that persons are aware of, then they'll have to bring them to the attention, not just of the credit bureau, but certainly of the credit information provider as it relates to this process. Now, I make quick reference, sir, to clause 29, because you know we operate in a single market and a single economy, and oftentimes even and it's interesting, sir, because you have financial institutions in Barbados that operate across the region, and even though you have employees of the same financial institution operating across the region, even if those employees move from one region to the next, sir, it's as if they're completely new to the process, even though they're working for the same financial institution. So imagine, sir, you or I, who trying to earn a living, decide we can take up and go to another jurisdiction within the single market. It is as if we are starting fresh. And therefore, the issue of cross-border credit reporting is important, because if the single market and the single economy is going to work, sir, and work effectively, then the credit information that certainly, and all of the commercial banks for the most part, even though they're retreating, sir, they're operating across the region. And therefore, your credit report, sir, if you are desirous of moving to Antigua or Jamaica or Trinidad or any other part of the region, sir, you now have the capacity that if you took your family and you moved to another jurisdiction, sir, that the credit report that you have in Barbados would then go with you into that jurisdiction. That allows then the financial institutions in that jurisdiction to know who you are and your family, sir. So that, whilst and conversely, sir, technically, if you're a business, sir, and you are finding it difficult getting credit in Barbados, you can indeed provide your report to another institution operating in another space, because you're now able to look at your activity in Barbados, and you can then source financing, sir, from within the context of the region. And therefore, these are critical provisions that now makes life a little easier, I believe, for the ordinary citizen, certainly for the ordinary business in Barbados, and given the commitment, sir, that we have given certainly to providing more opportunities for Barbadians in the context of the sub-region in terms of CARICOM, sir, as well as other exposure. Beyond, sir, beyond just the sub-region, the ability for an entity, because of the ability to send reports cross-border, it really does change the financing environment, sir, at least from a legislative perspective, for business to be done in the country. And therefore, it just provides a framework, sir, within which information can be exchanged, and therefore greater access to, again, you're opening up, sir, access to credit. So if we're going to move our families physically to another jurisdiction, we can take our credit history with us and give to the financial institution there, because you have it. It is certified. And therefore, it makes it easier for Barbadians to move in the region. Businesses have the capacity, sir, to take that same credit information and provide to a financial institution outside of Barbados. And if they so desire, they can online, with respect to that subject, obviously, of course, to any specific foreign exchange. I'm only thinking of the OECS, subject to any foreign exchange provisions or regulations that they may have within the context of their financial institutions, to so do in respect of that. But as we seek to open up the space, sir, for financing and capital, as you know, we've committed as a sub-region to the movement of capital. I think the credit reporting provisions allow for that equally to take place as it relates to that. So the truth is, sir, there's a lot here to unpack, but I really believe that the mental shift we have to re-engineer or engineer, depending on how you look at it, sir, because it is up to us now, sir, to make this legislation work in the interest of ordinary Barbadians, work in the interest of business persons, small, medium, or large, sir, to be able to turn this now into an opportunity where we can expand our enterprise and to understand that the accessing of credit will no longer be limited, sir, to what you can get from in Barbados. And if you're certainly earning foreign exchange as an entity, then your ability, given that we have indeed liberalized the space with respect to allowing persons to hold foreign currency, if you are indeed earning that foreign currency in the way that you are, then the potential for you to be able to access credit from outside of Barbados and to be able to settle, obviously is there, such that we can see growth and expansion in the context of domestically. And furthermore, sir, if a company wishes to establish a jurisdiction or subsidiary, in a jurisdiction, a subsidiary in a jurisdiction within the context of the sub-region or otherwise, sir, this cross-border reporting is going to be critical as an element for allowing that to take place. And these, sir, are just some of the what I believe to be the important elements in respect of what is being done here, sir. I want to just very quickly, sir, given that we are talking about fair credit and understand the context in which we are operating. So whilst I've spent a lot of time, sir, on what technically people may refer to as the micro part of the discussion for which it is intended, this really has a macroeconomic is of macroeconomic significance, because the more credit that we can have accessible, sir, to a wide range of cross-section of individuals, industries, sectors, stakeholders, sir, within this, it then starts to galvanize and creates the conditions for growth. And I know that members of the last administration are particularly familiar with the tens of downgrades that they got because of their mismanagement of the Barbados economy. And for them, sir, this type of system will scare them. But it does not scare us, sir, because we have been committed to fiscal discipline. We have borrowed and financed our way through this process, sir, that is sustainable, and the extent to which we are able to drive the recovery and drive growth, sir, is where we have been focusing, sir, for the last 3.5 years in right-sizing and putting the necessary infrastructure in place for growth. The reality is, sir, is that COVID has been a significant disruptor for a whole host of reasons. And the extent to which, on the macro level, we have had to borrow with respect to providing the range of public services that we've had to do. We've done so, sir, in the context that it is at the lowest possible interest rate, but not just that it is the lowest possible interest rate, sir. It is that the entities have had confidence, sir, in Barbados to borrow, to lend us the money. And the extent to which Barbados has gone through, in effect, sir, given we've done the debt restructuring, we've had to make adjustments because of COVID to the program, sir. Barbados has in effect been it's as if we've gone through the process, sir, of credit adjudication. And the stakeholders have given a thumbs up, sir, with respect to how this government has managed, not just in the pandemic, sir, but the structural reforms that we continue to execute, of which this is a part, sir, because at the end of the day, it is the unlocking of sustainable credit for the coconut vendor, sir, who might want to get a new truck, for the bicycle man, sir, who wants to expand on his fleet, for the taxi guy, sir, who might have 3 or 4 permits, sir, who can now, because of his turnover, he's able to add to his fleet of vehicles, sir, for the barbers and the hairdressers, sir, that they can expand their spaces and get a few more stalls in, sir, for more activity to take place, sir. For the fruit vendors, sir, in town, the vegetable vendors in town, sir, to be able to invest in the type of technology that allows them to be able to offer their services online and to move their businesses to a different level. Still vending, but move it to a different level, sir. That these are the nuts and bolts with respect to how we are going to build out a sustainable trajectory for accessing credit for small, medium, and even large businesses to be able to ensure that this Barbados economy, sir, can recover. So whilst I've been hearing, sir, a number of things regarding the level of debt that the country has taken on, sir, and trust me, sir, it was not something that we anticipated at the beginning of last year, because having met our targets up until the end of March last year, we were intending not to have to borrow before the end of the program, which is scheduled for March 2022. And I bring this point, I will bring this to a head, sir, on this particular point, because in much the same way, sir, as members of the public are members of the credit union movement, sir, Barbados is a member of the International Monetary Fund. And the truth is, sir, the International Monetary Fund is like a credit union. It really is. Because you put your monies in, sir, and you access as required, just like when you put your monies in the credit union, sir, and the credit union makes a small surplus, they will give you, sir, a little part of that surplus as dividends, which is what they do. Now, of course, you go to the International Monetary Fund for various things depending on if you have balance of payments or these issues. But I want to stress specifically, sir, because we're talking about that because we've had to respond, certainly in the last 6 months, sir, to a number of very key and pressing things, from the ash to the summer surge in COVID, sir, to the recapitalization of the NAS, as well as the response to Hurricane Elsa. That because of that demand, sir, for additional expenditure, which is completely, sir, unplanned, we've had to utilize in a according to the law, provisions that allows us to be able to access the monies that the International Monetary Fund, sir, made available for all countries to fight the pandemic. And I refer specifically, sir, to the allocation of SDRs, special drawing rights, which is effectively, sir, is tantamount to the surplus that a credit union would make and would distribute to its members once you have the, you have the AGM and they will vote on that to distribute to its members. Now, obviously, because we passed so a couple of things happened, sir. You recall that we passed in the Central Bank Act that the only mechanism through which that the Central Bank can lend to government, technically, is in the context of a pandemic or some natural disaster, which is capped by 3% of GDP. Now, I'm saying all of this to say that there's been reference made to the government printing money. And I want the public to be aware that we took a conscious decision that whilst the SDR, sir, belongs to the government of Barbados, it's not the central bank, belongs to the government. So the money has already been gone into the reserve, it belongs to the government. Because at this particular point in time with respect to the provisions, and I know that members will be aware that the BOSS program is coming to an end of December 31st of 2021. We took a decision based on what we saw in terms of some of the appetite in the domestic market. We took a decision that rather than just use the money directly to put a bond into the market, which the central bank will participate using the monies that we already have, sir, allow persons in the private sector to participate in that pandemic bond as a way, sir, to making our way back to normal provisioning with respect to credit and the credit markets. Because you will recall, sir, that since October of 2018, when we entered the extended funds facility and executed the program, that we have not issued, since those domestic bonds were restructured on that date, sir, that we have not issued any debt, any new debt, as the government of Barbados in that time. And therefore, we took an opportunity now, sir, to be able to say to the market, based on all of the reports that we have received from the International Monetary Fund, all of the reports that we've received from the credit rating agencies, that we will put this into the market as a way for us to be able to move back into a process whereby the government can resume, in a sense, its financing mechanism. And therefore, it is not by any stretch of the imagination, sir, by any stretch of the imagination, any printing of money in the way that the last government was that they were doing. It belongs to the government of Barbados as a member of the International Monetary Fund, just like if you are a member of the credit union declares a surplus, you get a little piece. So Barbados get piece, sir, Antigua get piece, Jamaica get piece, Trinidad get piece, everybody get piece, sir. And because of the way for us to get access the money, the way that the law was structured, this is the mechanism through which we've determined that we will do it to ensure then that we are in a position to continue to respond to the public policy. And all of this, sir, all of this is happening because, one, we as Barbados, we advocated very strongly, sir, very strongly for the reallocation of the SDRs. We also did it as part of the response to the climate adaptation as part of COP26 as well. And we are continuing, sir, to press the case for small island developing states and the way that these things are financed. Yes, we have taken on some debt in the last 18 months that we did not expect that we would. We will continue, sir, to press that all the debt that is related to COVID, sir, or the credit that was extended to countries as it relates to COVID, that those credits be worked out over 30, 40, 50 years, sir, such that the recovery and the financing of those debts will have a minimal impact on the fiscal situation of countries. Because as we were responding, sir, to COVID, remember we had the ash fall, we had the hurricane, sir, and therefore along the way we know that there will continue to be bumps, and therefore we will continue to work with the international community, not just on behalf of Barbados, but certainly on behalf of small states even medium-sized states that are vulnerable, sir, vulnerable, that we will continue to advocate that all of the debt that was taken on because of COVID, that those be worked out over a longer period, such that as we resume normal activity, that it wouldn't create a debt overhang. These are the discussions that are taking place. They are multifaceted, sir, multifaceted discussions. So any attempt by anybody out in the public to raise alarm about debt as it relates to what we have done, sir, we have done so to make sure that we did not, sir, send home any public servants during this particular time, that we continue, sir, to provide the range of public services that we could offer as government, that we can continue, sir, to give the resources to the Ministry of Health to fight the pandemic whilst keeping the traditional healthcare infrastructure in place, because I'm not sure if people are aware, sir, but if the persons who are at Harrison Point and the other isolation facilities had to be in the QE8, sir, then there will be no space for the patients who are at the QE8 today. And therefore, this policy decision, sir, had to be made on that, and we made a decision, and we stand by those decisions, sir. But we equally, sir, had to ensure that the extension of social protection measures were there. And I say that in the context of this bill, sir, because people only extend credit to you, sir, at concessional rates when they are confident, sir, confident that you will repay. And we are having these substantive discussions. I again, sir, invite persons to read the fiscal framework, to read the midterm report, to read the IMF reviews staff report, sir, to read all of the reports, sir, because there's nothing that is being said that we have not addressed. And I know that as we enter the season, sir, as we enter the season, people will wish to become relevant in this season. But the reality is that this government, sir, has been working not just at home, but certainly abroad, sir, to be able to press the case, not just for Barbados, but to press the case for all small countries, small states that are truly vulnerable as part of this process, to be able to get a long-term, sir, solution with respect to the COVID debt. Once the GDP is able to rebound, sir, because two things happen, sir. We had to borrow because the revenues fell out. But equally, because the economy contracted by almost 20%, sir, it means that the debt to GDP ratio is out of sync. So even though you look at it now, it says 146. Once we get back to 2019 levels and surpass that, sir, and we need to be able to do so with Barbadians as we continue to reopen. I again take this opportunity, sir, to encourage persons to get vaccinated, number one. Continue to follow the protocol, sir, so that as we reopen, there's more activity, the GDP comes back, and those ratios, sir, start to normalize and make sense again. Whilst we continue, sir, to work with other stakeholders to take that specific COVID debt and stretch it out over 40, 50 years, sir, to have a minimal impact with respect to the debt service over time. And that, sir, is what Barbados has been advocating for in all the various international fora that we have been engaging in, because we understood very clearly that the debt workout and the nature of it is what is going to make the difference with respect to the ultimately the recovery. So I wish to indicate through you, sir, that there's nothing that's being said about debt that we haven't been already discussing with the various stakeholders. As a matter of fact, sir, I can say to you and this chamber, since I take this opportunity to address it, that there are 5 specific loan contracts by the IDB, sir, which Cabinet approved, I think it was 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago, it could be I don't recall the exact timeline, sir. 2 weeks ago, that will now include, sir, a natural disaster clause in those 5 investment loans by the IDB, sir, which will, because the loan contracts have already come to this Parliament. And this is something that we advocated for since coming to office. And I want to thank the IDB, sir, for reviewing the portfolio of loans that they have with us, to be able to include those clauses, sir, retroactively, because it allows us that if there is a significant natural disaster in Barbados, that we could suspend the principal payment, sir, on those 5 specific loans for 2 years, in the same way that we have done with our domestic and our international debt obligations. So Barbados, sir, continues to press with respect to what we have been advocating for with respect to debt. And it is, sir, I don't really make a big set of noise about a lot of things. I just get on with it, sir. And I know that there will be a time for all of this to be ventilated. But I give the country the assurance, sir, that this government continues to work proactively, sir, with respect to resolving these problems. We will continue, sir, with the reform efforts that we have committed to. We will continue to manage this situation fiscally, sir, such that the context of this bill here, that when people go forward and look at the macro framework for Barbados, that whether you're a coconut vendor, sir, whether you are a store owner in Swan Street, whether you are a big retail entity, sir, whether you're an insurance company or a bank or any other entity in Barbados, that when you are looking to make investments, sir, that the considerations with respect to macro stability, sir, should be secondary and not primary, as it was the case, sir, under the last administration. And this government, sir, is committed to removing the obstacles with respect to business facilitation. This piece of legislation, I believe, is transformative in with respect to that. But we, sir, as individuals or as directors or managers in various businesses, sir, we now have to exercise that mental shift, as I spoke to earlier, with respect to being able to bring this this legislation to life and become part, sir, of our business decision making going forward. I am not going to say too much more on this because the bill does have some very specific provisions, sir, for dispute resolution and the like, which are clearly ventilated there. But the framework within which we are seeking to set this up, sir, is one that I believe, sir, will bring transformational change for Barbados. But we have to be sufficiently engaged, sir, and the central bank early. I know that right now, sir, people are probably focusing on Christmas and preparing for Christmas, sir, and all of that. And by extension, sir, I know that a lot of higher purchase and stuff will take place over the next few weeks. But the reality is we want to give Barbadians, sir, very early on in the new year, a very aggressive public awareness campaign surrounding this particular bill before it is proclaimed, such that the stakeholders and everybody, sir, that we are all on the same page with respect to what will take place, and to in a sense, sir, make sure that we get this process, as we have started with the establishment of the trust loan. I know that there are a number of other reforms that will come into play at the same time, but the reality is, sir, I believe that this bill will be transformational for a whole host of reasons, and I ask that Barbadians take the time, sir, to digest when the public relations campaign starts, to digest, have conversations with their financial institutions, sir, because at the end of the day, it is those conversations that will help us to make, I think, better financial decisions. I was almost going to use one of the slogans of one of the entities, but I decided not to. But the intent, sir, is to allow people to make better financial decisions. And I believe, sir, that this fair credit reporting bill Once enacted, will create the framework for that to happen. As I said, the central bank, sir, will be the regulator. A lot has been put on them to be able to resolve. There is reference to a tribunal, which, as you are aware, sir, the Financial Services Tribunal is to be established, but that's almost ready, sir, which will govern a whole, not just the payment side, this particular aspect, as well as market conduct issues as it relates to financial institutions in general. I do know, sir, that there is an element of predatory lending that maybe is of some concern. I believe that the provision of this type of information, as well as the enhancement of the services that the Financial Literacy Bureau is already rolling out, will help to mitigate some of that, so that we can make sure that persons can make the best decisions possible. And so, sir, I want to thank you for the opportunity to raise this bill, and to say to all Barbadians that we can make this happen if we are prepared, sir, to participate in our own financial success with the discipline to monitor. We will, as government, we will put the systems in place, sir, to make sure that it can be as easy as possible. But by the same token, sir, we must actively participate in that wealth management. And so, sir, I beg, with those few words, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time. I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Methinks, Mr. Speaker, that the honourable gentleman who just took his seat doth protest too much. He refers to an approaching season and the desire on the part of some to stay relevant because of an approaching season. The season I have in mind that is imminent is Christmas. It's Christmas. I don't know that any of us here needs to seek to stay relevant at this time of year, because we all have family, friends. We are part of a good-natured community. We share with each other. We celebrate the same blessings under God. So I don't know that any of us needs to make any extra special effort to stay relevant at the season of Christmas. So my inclination was to think he had in mind some other season, which he knows, apparently, to be imminent, and that it will be the need on the part of some to try and stay relevant in here and outside of here, on the ground where it matters. Mr. Speaker, yes, if debt is properly handled and managed, it can help to induce growth or conduce to growth if your borrowings are prudent, timely, and properly managed. And it would seem to me that the subject of debt causes a bit of nervousness for this government. They talk a lot about reserves. They talk a lot about capacity to repay. They talk a lot about the confidence out there in the market on the part of creditors and investors. But yet they seem to be uncomfortable with the discussion on the business of debt. Seems to stick in the political craw of the government. So yes, we do agree that debt, as the honourable member who last spoke raised the issue, once managed properly, can conduce to growth. Yes, it is true that we can obtain credit, especially at the institutional level, at the very low rate of interest, 1% or less. And yes, it is true that there's a willingness on the part of other institutional lenders to give us credit because we are under the strictures of an IMF program. And it is in that context, an extended facility program, that others find a measure of confidence that they can lend to us loans which are attached, critically so, to policy initiatives. So all of that is true. But they know that at the end of the day, because we are under this IMF program, we have to repay. They know, and we know, that we cannot default on our debt again going forward. They know, and we know, that we defaulted on our foreign debt. We defaulted on domestic debt at both the personal and in some instances that has to do with pensioners and the institutional level. And that has created a level of pain across Barbados. Government thought it absolutely necessary and did it. And so they stand to tell us that creditors now will feel relatively comfortable that when they borrow, they can repay and that they can extend credit facility at low interest rates. Truth is, we are under the hands of the IMF. And whether we shout it loudly or whisper it with some measure of confidence, at the end of the day, we have to repay that which we borrow, because we dare not even consider the business of defaulting again, at least not on our foreign debt, and certainly not on any domestic debt before the season comes, whatever season that might be. But, Mr. Speaker, in the absence of growth, and I certainly for one will continue to maintain, in the absence of a clear strategy for growth, and in the absence of indicators of any positive growth, don't make us refer to numbers that you hear today, because they speak with reference to what obtained in the last period under reference. Yeah. And if you're coming from down 40 feet and you've come up 20 feet, you're still 20 feet down below. And that has to be understood. The point we're making here, in the absence of definitive plans for strategic growth action and growth initiatives, question will always remain and has not yet been answered. How do you repay? And at what price do we mortgage the future of our children, those who come behind us? And when you do repay, and especially if you're not generating enough, and when you're faced with the strain and stress of repaying, what are the implications for the ability of the state to provide public services and social service benefits to which the state is committed by long-established policy and under law? These questions are serious questions. When faced, therefore, with the challenges that arise out of that kind of a scenario, high and mountain debt, low or non-existent growth, you have to repay because you can't default. You want to be in a position to provide social services and provide for public service and other social security benefits that we are committed to under law and regulation and policy. Then you have to resort to liens on the NIS, as we have done in the past. You have to resort to liens on the Central Bank of Barbados, as we're doing now or proposing to do. And you can describe it in whatever terms you want, but at the end of the day, you're making recourse to central bank financing in a challenging situation. Enough on that. The Honourable Member raised it, so I just thought, Mr. Speaker, I would make a little bit of response. Now, the Honourable Member for Christchurch, East Central, says that this Fair Credit Bill before us is intended to enhance the architecture around business in Barbados, and that is absolutely necessary. And one of the deficiencies in our economic architecture is the lack of proper, robust, fair credit mechanisms that will help with the business transactions involving not only individuals, but institutions as well. So I do agree that a legislative initiative like this, if properly managed, properly structured, and then properly implemented, can serve to enhance the data sharing architecture around business in Barbados at the level of the individual, level of businesses. Because in truth, the economy works substantially so on credit and access to capital, which individuals or businesses may not have at hand. And if they're to be viable in their ventures, then they must have access to capital by means of credit, because the economy works substantially so on that. There are very few people who have legitimately acquired a property, built a home, without having to make recourse to credit. I believe even persons of your ilk, Mr. Speaker, would have found it necessary to make recourse to credit facilities with respect to ownership on property and perhaps ownership with the development of business. So even persons of your means and stature, of your ilk, persons of far less stature, as myself, have had to do the same. So the economy functions like that, on largely so on credit transactions. And Mr. Speaker, we know in the context of Barbados, if you do not have the facilitating mechanisms, properly so the regulatory mechanisms, to make sure that credit transactions and stuff like that are properly handled, then some people are significantly disadvantaged. And the facilities which ought to be available to them are not necessarily so available. The big boys, Mr. Speaker, can pick up a phone and make a phone call. You can't do that. I can't do that. The big boys can pick up a telephone and make a phone call and get it done. The big boys can drop a name and get it done. You and I can't do that. And so pieces of regulatory architecture such as this would help to create better so a context in which necessary transactions can go down in the interest of the economy, in the interest of the country, and in the interest of individuals, in the interest of business. From that perspective, I would want to be supportive of the initiative to create the kind of environment in which credit transactions take place with a higher level of integrity and with a higher level of fairness. Now, Mr. Speaker, I don't want to be mischievous, and I really do hope that the Honourable Member will and is in a position to speak to us on this particular matter, because at clause 2 of the bill, Mr. Speaker, which is the interpretation section of the bill, and interpretation section of the bill at clause 2 on page 14 for ease of reference refers to sensitive personal information, and it's suggestive of the fact that credit reports should not include certain sensitive personal information, and personal information on the interpretation clause of this refers to the subjects the person being reported on, racial or ethnic origin, person's political opinions, understandably so. Religious beliefs or other beliefs of a similar nature, understandably so. Membership of a political body should not be part of the content of the reporting. Membership of a trade union, we all understand that. Genetic data, biometric data, physical or mental health condition, or criminal record, strangely enough. But the one I want to question is mention of sexual orientation or sex life. Because for the life of me, I can't figure out why that makes its way into this. I really can't, except that it constitutes part of a pattern. I can't imagine why it makes its way into this. Now that is at page 14, and that is at clause 2 of page 14. And I would really sincerely wish that the honorable member would explain to us, if he can, why is it necessary to put that in there, unless, Mr. Speaker, you can laugh if you want, but my concern is that it is finding it's a phrasing which seems to denote some characteristic of behavior or of humanity in these days that is finding its way into important pieces of legislation brought to this House. Mr. Speaker, it is in the welcome stamp legislation, you know. It is in the anti-discrimination legislation with reference to employment and job opportunity. It is in there, you know. It is in the charter that just came to this Parliament a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Speaker. And here it is again, and I have to wonder if it constitutes part of a pattern that signals something for us. Now, anyone here who wants to can laugh. Can laugh at that, can laugh at me. I've been laughed at before, and worse has been done to me. But I have to wonder if this constitutes part. Why in the world does this find itself in this piece of legislation? Is there a pattern emerging in Barbados where in every important, significant piece of legislation, and one wonders what is going to happen when we start to formulate a new constitution in Barbados? Is that going to be the case? Now on page 32, Mr. Speaker, which is clause 19, and it speaks specifically to the fact that sensitive information, and that sensitive information is characterized or given substantive expression to in clause 2, the interpretation clause, but in clause 19 on page 32, again it specifies much more so in detail that when you're reporting on people, there's certain things that should not be included in the report. And here it is, sensitive personal information, and as I just pointed out, you know what is captured in there. We understand your political opinion, your political affiliation, your faith position. We understand all of those things. But what sexual orientation, sex life, what in the world, how does that find its way in there? If we have a concern, why aren't we simply saying gender, even in an age when that is a topic now, which is very much subject to question and to change from day to day? I hope and I wish the honourable member who presented this bill can respond to that. I was reading this bill in the early hours this morning, and this thing hit me. Mr. Speaker, at 3 o'clock, you should be sleeping soundly, but you have to read bills and prepare for Parliament. If you get notice late, you have to be reading very late. And when you hit these things, if you're not fully awake, it brings you fully awake, I assure you. Because I don't know. They can laugh, but explain to Barbadians out there why something like that isn't here. And if you put it in the context of what we have been seeing in recent weeks and months, is there a pattern emerging with respect to the build-out of new legislation in Barbados to incorporate lifestyles and to incorporate legislatively held positions on issues which themselves may be in contra in contrast and contradiction to other existing pieces of legislation. Well, we look forward to the explanation. I agree with the honourable member that pressure needs to be put on the utilities. Well, he didn't say this, but there is some concern on my part, certainly on the part of several others I've heard from. And if you are a member of parliament who is available to your people personally or by phone or some means of contact, they raise these issues. The utility companies in Barbados, and there's one especially which has now gone in my view, into the category of the infamous. The service provided is the poorest quality of all the utilities in Barbados. I will not mention names, but pressure needs to be put on utilities in Barbados, and the utility companies in Barbados are numbered among that listing of institutions that can give credit reports on people, etc., credit information on people. But they themselves need to be pressured, because just like the honourable member said of himself, I've had my own experiences with them, with bills that should not come. I remember distinctly one utility, a state-related, state-owned utility, the Barbados Water Authority, once gave me a bill for $7,000 something. Mr. Speaker, it was from my constituency office, not my house, thankfully. Constituency office, not that it made a difference, because Parliament would not pay that. And when I inquired, they said to see if the meter was properly read, and told me that there was a problem with the reading of the meter or something like that. They would have it redone. I was glad to hear that. They had it redone, Mr. Speaker, and the bill moved from $7,000 to $14,007. Told me it was an underground leak, which I couldn't see. Now, I'm making that point only to say that utility companies operate in Barbados, and though we have oversight mechanisms, they still seem to get away with what the average Bajan would call a lot of murder in Barbados, and give poor people stress. And I think those requisite agencies charged with oversight of some of these utilities need to hear more clearly the voice of government, or to feel the feet of government, to make sure that they're doing what they are set up to do as a regulatory entity to protect the interests of poor people in this country. I mentioned that because the honourable member raised it as well, and it is a concern to many people, Mr. Speaker. Now, you know, whatever we do in Barbados and whatever we do in this Parliament, we do it in the context of a culture. And I heard the honourable member give the assurance to Barbados today and to this Parliament that when you engage in your credit transactions, nobody will know. Information will not go here, it will not go there, and nobody will know. And I thought to myself, the young man is absolutely deluded. He's quite honourable, but I think perhaps with reference to some of these things, he may be a bit youthful and inexperienced. The truth of the matter is, there's hardly anything about you, about me, that half of Barbados does not know or will not hear. Sometimes those things said or written or documented are not necessarily true. But the point I'm making is that information gets around. Whatever we do in a culture. Now, we can do things to improve the situation, and hopefully this legislation will achieve the objective of improving the situation. Yet, that notwithstanding, I think it is a bit extreme to suggest that nobody will know. What we do, we do in a culture, the context of a culture. I say that to say that privacy is absolutely critical and essential. We can set up legislation like this and be very well intentioned, have the best of motivation. But you see, this thing of privacy, I believe that we need to be better as a society, as a national community, with how we handle matters which fall under that kind of an umbrella of privacy, and then when there are breaches, how we treat to those breaches. Privacy is a critical component. It seriously is a challenge, particularly so, Mr. Speaker, in a culture which is a small context culture like ours. Small context, we don't live in a large land mass space. We live in a small context culture. Institutions for us perhaps might seem to be many. Comparative terms, a few institutions. There's connectivity. The whole business of commonly shared directorship positions and stuff like that. All of these things obtained still in Barbados today, Mr. Speaker. The politics comes into it. Hey, the politics comes into it too. That is a strong dynamic in the culture. And if you happen to be on the wrong side and you have an issue, trust me, that information gets to the other side. That is the Barbados, the world in which we live. What we do in a particular cultural context, and we have got to be aware of that and try as far as possible to minimize the potential for serious damage and breaches. We live in a highly competitive environment. People share information to acquire advantage. Everybody knows somebody else, his family to somebody else. That's Barbados. So don't let us walk off and delude ourselves into thinking that it will not be shared, it will not be known. It will be, and sometimes it is intentionally done so, either to acquire advantage or to do mischief or damage or harm to somebody. I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the penalty applying to breaches of privacy within the context of this legislation should be significant and severe. Where your rights as a consumer, where your rights as a person party to a credit transaction, where they are breached, the penalties should be significant and severe. I look all over this legislation as quickly as I could, and I think I see $50,000 applied here and there. To me, that's very small compared to some of the other penalties we provided for in other pieces of legislation. This is serious breaches that we're talking about here. We're talking about people's private information being shared in a world which has become rather small because of the access to technology. It is said here, and 5 seconds from now, having been said here, it is to the other corner of the world. And Mr. Speaker, the damages attaching to breaches of the regulations around this piece of legislation, to me, should be significant and should be severe. You're operating here on this legislation in a context within which your personal information is being traded. In fact, it's being commercialized. It's not simply being shared. It's being made the business around which other people make money. So it's being commercialized and it's being traded. And where, therefore, this is the case, the demand laid upon those who are involved in these transactions and the capacity for enforcement against breaches of these transactions, these regulations, should be something which is seriously considered and seriously implemented and enacted without compromise. You cannot play with people and people's information in the world of today. Now, there's a growing credit card culture, and I don't know exactly where we are as a people with reference to this. Don't know how the government sees this, but my sense, standing from the distance, is this growing culture of credit and card debt. It is perhaps more so American phenomenon, some parts of Western Europe, Asia, but to the extent that it is a problem in Barbados, I think it is something that needs to be looked at by the government. And card debt is attractive. Credit card debt is attractive, Mr. Speaker, because obviously In these instances, you're not talking about having to provide collateral. This is a debt which is unsecured, unlike the other debts which attach to your mortgage situation and other massive loans. Credit card is a situation where you're dealing with unsecured debt and you have not had to put in place perhaps collateral arrangements. So it becomes more appealing, easier to access. And to that extent, therefore, it becomes very much a part of the culture that we have imported. Some aspects of it absolutely necessary. Some aspects of it perhaps we need to keep an eye on. But it comes at the end of the day, perhaps in certain contexts with high application of high interest rates. Because if you repay on time, well, that's cool. But you miss your repayment date, and then you run into payment of interest, and that interest rate applying in that situation where there's no collateral applying, where there's unsecured debt situation, then those interest rates are high. And one wonders the extent to which this is impacting upon poor families and households in Barbados. You look at the stability report, I have one here for 2020, I think there's one in 2017 that I remember reading as well. And it speaks to this thing, the impact of the card debt upon households. Its negative impact upon households, which is one of the primary units in any economy. The other issue I'd want to raise is the fate or the plight, more so, of small and medium enterprises in our economy. They have had to struggle with the business of accessing credit, and big businesses need it. Small and medium-sized businesses need it as well. And we can talk about these types of pieces of legislation here in macro terms. We can talk about them in glowing terms. So I like to look at some of the practicalities too when it comes to that. And the truth of the matter is a small business which significantly contribute to employment levels in Barbados, which contribute importantly as well to export earnings for Barbados. Small businesses have struggled to find access to credit and access to capital despite the contribution that they are making to the economy. So the question therefore is, when we put legislative planks like this in place and build out the architecture to make for a better context, what are we doing about some of the other things that continue to cause disadvantage, especially to a sector like the small business sector? What are we doing to get beyond the other impediments which exist? We can say that part of the problem lies inherently with some of these businesses themselves, because they have poor management practices, they have poor financial recording and data collection practices. But what are we doing as a state, as a government, as economy and the parliament to make sure that we can help to treat to some of these impediments if we really want to enhance the context in which this economy operates? Recognize the tremendous contribution of small businesses, and what are we doing therefore to help with the challenges that they face and to help them to get beyond some of those impediments that retard their progress. The minister himself in the presentation referred to the fact that sometimes the financial products offered by lending institutions are not appealing and not attractive. And therefore they have people, individuals again, and small businesses at a disadvantage. If it is not attractive and appealing, then I can't go into it. If it's not attractive and appealing, I feel forced to go into it, then it serves disadvantage to me, an impediment to my business, and the likelihood that greater levels of failure than that of success, than those of success, will attend my business. We need to do more to address the bureaucratic challenges that exist in the level of economy that stifle the development of small businesses. It is good to do this, but what about the other things that stifle that? Barbados is still, well, up until last time I checked, 150 something out of 119 countries in terms of our rating on doing business. And that is high, and that's a poor record, and that's a poor status to hold 152 of 190 countries considered for ease of doing business, and involved in that whole business, that whole matter of lack of ease in doing business is what happens with the life and the viability of small and medium-sized enterprises in Barbados. We need to treat to them to help in a more macro frame the entire economy of Barbados. And I'm saying all these things simply to say this bill itself may be good in several respects, then there is still more that we need to do. Now, I would hope that the Honourable Minister also can clarify for us a little bit more. He did say 1, 2 things, but he didn't spend a lot of time. The significant rights which this piece of legislation will confer on those involved, especially consumers in these credit transactions. They refer to as data subjects. So the data subjects' rights of access and correction, some of them are listed on page 41 and clause 27. And I really would like to hear him clarify a little bit more on these matters, because people have to understand without doubt what their rights are. And when those rights are infringed, people have to understand what is the recourse available to them and what are the penalties to be meted out to those who cause the breach or breaches. The right to know if your information is used against you from a credit report, is that fully captured in here? I have to admit I didn't have time to read through all of this, but is that fully captured in there, that right for you to know if information is used against you, if you have a right to what they call a file disclosure, if there is an adverse, what is called an adverse action taken against you based on these reports. I think the minister did make it fairly clear we have a right to know what our credit score is and what has impacted or affected that credit score in a negative fashion. We have a right to dispute information which is shared concerning ourselves, and we should be able to take action legally for misuse or inaccuracies with respect to that information. And to be sure, of course, that information is shared only with persons who have a legitimate interest in the particular situation or the particular consumer. So I would really like for him to, if he can, elaborate a bit on, he did make reference to rights, but elaborate and give a little bit more clarity to what those rights may be. I encourage him not to let the discussion on debt trouble him over much, such that he loses his sleep. And I thank him for bringing the legislation.
Member St. Joseph.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we take our lunch break and therefore suspend and return at 2:15. Is that fine favor with His Honor?
Yes.
So, beg to move that we suspend until 2:15.
Questions at this honorable chamber? We suspended for lunch until 2:15 p.m. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands suspended until 2:15 p.m.